Going on YouTube, Smaller here, and this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of video than I've been doing, but I've just been thinking about this a lot lately, especially having just played and finished the Starfield DLC, Shattered Space, and I see a lot of discourse on this, kind of, indirectly and whatnot, just talking about it, of a lot of people just trashing on Starfield. But what about our beloved games of Bethesda of old, Morrowind, Oblivion, or even Skyrim, or Fallout 3? Some people will even go so far as to say Fallout 4 is still absolutely incredible. By the way, I'm a huge Bethesda fanboy, and I pretty much love all their games. I even like Starfield, believe it or not. But I'm also not blind, and I don't think I'm dumb, and so I can still see all of the criticisms that are specifically the valid ones that everyone talks about. And I'm just like, for me personally, yeah, but I don't care. But I totally understand y'all's problems with the games, especially in today's market. But let's go ahead and go back. Let's go back to Elder Scrolls 3, Morrowind. That's the first one I played, and that's kind of like the big one everybody really starts to talk about. Arena and Daggerfall, not so much. They were, I feel like they were probably pretty big and groundbreaking games for their time, but Morrowind was like the real big one, partially because it also ended up on Xbox, on console, not just PC. For me personally, it is my favorite Bethesda game, is Morrowind. I feel like it has the strongest story and best dialogue and type stuff out of all their games. And gee, I wonder why. Because there's hardly any voice acting in the game. It's mostly written text. There is some voice and whatnot in the game. But for the most part, the majority of the game is text. And sometimes that can come across as stronger than having things voice acted. But one of the things I really want to talk about is back then. So Morrowind came out in 2002. This is the Metacritic ranking for all games in 2002. Morrowind. Oh, here it is. It's 40. It ranked at an 87 and an 8.5. Generally favorable. Granted, to be fair, this is Metacritic didn't even exist, I don't think, probably when Morrowind came out. But, there's a lot of other great games out there. But the things that people always talk about with these games that, it's the immersion, the characters, the amount of things that you can do. There's just so much and blah, 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 blah. What kind of competition did they have back then? You know what I mean? Let's look. What was the competition of the games back then? All right, you got Metroid Prime. I mean, that was the highest game rated that year. Which, all right, let's face it. When Metroid Prime hit, that game was fire. I literally got a GameCube just for that game. GTA Vice City. Okay, that game was also groundbreaking. But look at some of these other games that are like the best rated games. Madden, Tony Hawk, NFL. Sports games. Sports games were huge. Super Mario World. I don't know. It must be like some kind of remake thing because this is Sunshine over here. Splinter Cell. A lot of these games are. Okay, Splinter Cell. You got a fighting game. You got sports games. Eternal Darkness. I forgot about Metroid Fusion. Medal of Honor. Resident Evil. Okay, so Resident Evil. This is the remake, right? Star Wars Jedi Outcast. Time Splitters. Want to know one thing that I'm noticing on a lot of these games, though? The overwhelming majority of these games, or if anything, it's all of them except maybe Neverwinter Nights, they are all either sports, fighting, or something like that, or like competitive multiplayer type games, because you have Warcraft 3 here, which is fantastic. They're very linear games, very linear story-driven games, or just kind of action things. So the games themselves weren't very complex. So for its time, Morrowind was an extremely complex game. Because basically, if you're looking at Starfield, how much has really changed from the type of game Starfield is from all the way back to Morrowind. Yeah, sure, okay, you get space flight. There's now more, voice dialogue in the game. There's a lot of quality of life stuff, I suppose. But the type of game and basically of everything that you feel like what you can do, it's more or less the same thing. If Starfield was released, maybe, lower the graphics a little bit, but release that game in 2005, everybody would be hailing that as the greatest game of all time. I just feel like there hasn't been a lot of progress. All right, their next game is Oblivion, 2006, 4 years later, right? Oblivion was better, well received. I personally didn't think it was as good, but that's because I honestly thought the story sucked. Now the side quests, the faction and the guild stuff I thought was fantastic, but the main story I did not think was great, at least for the base game. The DLC was better. I forgot what it was called. Shivering Isles, I think, maybe. But they gave it a 3. It's ranked 3, 94. But again, let's see. What's its competition? What is it up against? Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence. Oh, I forgot that was a thing. Company Heroes, Final Fantasy 12, Guitar Hero is on here, Ghost Recon, GTR 2, Gears of War is a big deal. Twilight Princess. Man, Twilight Princess. That's actually one of my least favorite Zelda games. Anyway, total sidebar. Tekken, Half-Life 2. Was this episode 1? Okay. But it's like what I'm looking at here. Let me look at 2. Okay, Kingdom Hearts 2. Metroid Prime Hunters. That's a DS game or something, right? Is there any other game that's even remotely like an open world, decision, your decisions matter type game in this era? Not really. Like nothing. It's a lot of sports. It's a lot of extremely linear games. Or it's multiplayer games. Right? You got Guild Wars here. I saw EverQuest 2. Final Fantasy 12 is a pretty big game. Obviously that is here. But there's not too many. Right? There's not a lot. Most of these games are pretty linear action games, maybe, not too much, a lot of systems and things like that. This is what I'm looking at. And I obviously am aware that there's probably a absolute buckload of other games that were out that are not on this Metacritic list, specifically like PC games and whatnot. But I'm just kind of going off of this because this is what like the general public is going to use to perceive, for their perception of these games and whatnot. So Oblivion comes out. I'm like, what else is out there that's like this? We're not really even thinking about the story. You're just in this game where you can just go and do whatever you want, pretty much, right? And there's no other game like it. There really isn't, unless you just want to play its predecessor, Morrowind. What other one did I pull up? Oh, yeah. And so here, I'm pulled up Starfield, which came out in 2023. What else is on this list? Baldur's Gate 3, arguably one of the greatest games of a generation. This game is beyond insane. We're in the era of Zelda being open world games. Tears of the Kingdom. Metroid Prime remake. Okay. Resident Evil 4. It's the remake of Resident Evil 4. Yes, it's a linear game. But Capcom's been killing it with their remakes, man. Like, they basically just take the original game and shove it into the modern era. And they do it so well. You have another big... This is an RPG. It's a JRPG, but it's massive. This game is massive. Xenoblade 3. Okay, you can argue some of this stuff. Okay. Spider-Man 2. This game's also out here, too. Spider-Man 2. You know, yes, it's linear-ish, but there's we live in a time of open worldness in video games too. This is another thing that you got to think about, and people need to realize. The open world meta, as it were, it's running rampant. And I'm one of the people that I think there should be less open world games, and there needs to be more just straight linear games. Maybe a little bit of side stuff, a sidebar here, sidebar there. But for the most part, the game is just point A to point B. It's just how do you get from point A to point B? But it's point A to point B. And I know I have a really hard time looking right at the camera. But yeah, Spider-Man 2, you got this massive area of Manhattan or New York or whatever. Sorry, I don't live there. I don't know. Marvel people are going to hate me. But the quality of what's in this game is insane. Right? And then for me, what would be like the closest comparison that we have here is this game right here. Cyberpunk. I hate these auto videos. Obviously, this is Phantom Liberty because Cyberpunk came out a couple years before that. But that even makes it worse. Cyberpunk. Right? How are you going to release a game like Starfield when Cyberpunk already exists and it's kind of fills the same niche of type of game, but just does what you're doing a million times better? Dialogue is insanely better. The voice acting, and when I say dialogue, I meant like the actual lines and the narrative and all that kind of stuff. The acting of it, though, significantly better. Animations, better. Graphics, better. Systems, better. Pretty much everything is just better. Across the board. We can talk about release Cyberpunk with, but CD Projekt Red did a very good recovery, I feel like. I was one of the people that I'm like, because a lot of people are like, oh, CDPR, they dropped the ball. Now they're a trash company. Nah, dude, they're going to get this back. They got it back. I'm still hyped for anything they release. So how does Starfield exist when you have this? It just doesn't make any sense. God of War. Well, Ragnarok came out the year before. But, again, we're in the open world meta, people. And with your decision-making, exploration, loot, and all this kind of stuff, all the things that the Bethesda games, not all of them, but a lot of the things that the Bethesda games did that no other games did, or more or less most games didn't do. Most games do now. It's just the way it is. And they just do everything better. Things are more polished. Animations are better dialogue, better stories. It's just, I don't know, man. I mean, I do. That's why I'm making this video and I'm talking about it. And I think you guys all know what I'm talking about, even if I'm not exactly being super clear about it. And it kind of sucks, especially as someone who loves all their games. Like I said, I just finished the Shattered Space DLC. I like it. I think it's decent. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed Starfield. I have like over 200 hours in Starfield. And oddly enough, that's probably the lowest amount of hours I have in any Bethesda game, because I love Bethesda games. But I'm worried about Elder Scrolls 6, man. It's like, and one of the things I think they really need to do, they need to drop the creation engine. They need to just bite the bullet, and they need a new engine to make their games. And that at least will fix a lot of the, a lot of the technical issues. Obviously, Starfield had a lot of technical issues at launch. The writing and all the dialogue, I don't know what they're going to do about that. I mean, hire somebody, outsource, do something, guys. I don't know. But the big thing, though, I think, is that, wrapping all the way back around if we can, because I drove off into Neverland. The nostalgia that a lot of people have of the old Bethesda games and why they're so beloved, but when they look at Starfield or, Fallout 76 and it was starting to feel this way a lot with Fallout 4, because when Fallout 4 came out, a lot of people were divided. I actually still think Fallout 4 is amazing. I don't, not just good. I think that Fallout 4 is actually an amazing game. But the older the games, the farther back you go, they had less competition. They were doing things decades. They were so advanced in terms of like what the games offered. Like well beyond what everybody else was doing. And then there's another thing too I feel like a lot of people don't really think about, is that there are more people now that play video games because playing video games is so mainstream these days. Like when I was growing up, you didn't talk about being a gamer. Oh, do you play video games? Okay. Here's my house phone. Call me later and we'll meet up, And then you guys play video game? No. We don't, it's there was just a lot less people that played video games. I'm not saying a lot of people didn't play video games. A lot of people did play video games, but it was a lot less than what people play today. And so the ratio of gamers that played like Morrowind and Oblivion versus the ratio of gamers that play and like Fallout and Starfield. Hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying. And I don't want this video to go on too long, but basically that's what it is, man. I feel like the older games just had less competition for what they offered than what games like Starfield have. There's plenty of other options that do the same thing, but way better. Anyways, hopefully Bethesda picks it all up. And yeah. Anyways, guys, like, comment, please. I like that kind of stuff. I read everything. I try to respond to everything, even if it's you telling me to piss off and my takes are horrible. And yeah, subscribe, all that. It all helps. Thank you very much.